Hello, good people. Welcome back to Off the Deep End, a Deep Listens podcast where we explore role-playing video games in depth. Yes, that's right. My name is Jeff Root, the host and the Corel Paradox of this operation. Joining me, as always, we have the Lotus123 of the Off the Deep Listens show, Braden, Arbitrary Water Redacted. Hello, Braden.
Hello.
Also joining us, as always, we have the Infocom cornerstone of this operation, Chris Zombie Pirate Acted. Hello, Chris.
This podcast has reawakened my addiction demons.
So if you couldn't tell by me naming exceptionally dry and outdated database and or spreadsheet management software, that can only mean we're talking about one thing.
A long-forgotten JRPG that nobody really remembers, other than a handful of freakos and internet perverts.
The darkest people in the world, basically. No one who you'd want to be your friend. Which is why you should join our Patreon.
Join our Patreon.
And you'll hear about things such as games like this one, which is Ogre Battle 64, person of lordly caliber. This was originally developed by Quest, apparently alongside Dual Corporation, which I should have clicked that Wikipedia article. It was published originally by Quest for the Nintendo 64. Wait, what?
They made an RPG that was of decent quality on the Nintendo 64.
That can't be right. It was originally published July 14th, 1999 in Japan. It was subsequently published by Atlas in the United States in the year 2000. And was subsequently released on the Wii and Wii U Virtual Console services. God rest ye, God rest ye, God rest ye. If you would like to be a part of pre-show discussions as we do in this little network, you are, of course, welcome to check out patreon.com/deeplistens. That is patreon.com/deeplistens, where you can kick in any dollar amount. One seems to have a very popular amount. Let me tell you guys about the number 2, though. It's like 1, but it's literally 100% bigger. But in the grand scheme of things, it's still less than like half a cup of coffee. But, that said, 1s are appreciated, 2s are appreciated.
Once we get to enough Patreons, what is it, 20? We said 20, right?
We're on the race to 20
We will be playing
subs.
Unlimited Saga for the podcast. And maybe have some other milestone games in mind.
Yeah, some very dark magic is brewing, ladies and gentlemen. But you gotta get
there's a giant hole that we've called the Abyss, and dear listeners, wherever you are, whether it's raw RSS feeds or YouTube or just the general Deep Listens, website posting thing, we're jumping in. We're jumping in.
All of you Deep Listens GeoCities fan pages out there,
keep sharing the tapes, Yes, Patreon. That will get you access to a Discord where we are in. We are Discord. We are in you. Is that what the youths say?
It's poggers.
Discord. I am poggers in you. You can also send us questions about our use of poggers and other millennial lingo via electronic mail. You can send those to inquiries@deep.lol. That is inquiries@deep.lol. A vanity top-level domain which has been renewed, and we will continue to use because I think it's a dumb joke. So there's that. Ogre Battle 64, I will say, right up top, when I was thinking of what the dumb theme of silly identifiers was, it was either going to be database management software or various, shipping services.
Not Queen songs?
Not Queen songs, no, because this is the one game where they didn't use a Queen song in the title, right?
Yeah.
Or the first time they did. I guess Ogre Battle Gaiden. I don't think there's a Queen song called Gaiden.
What about the Neo Geo Pocket used a Queen song?
Did it?
There's a portable version of this game.
Did you know there is a Neo Geo Pocket Color Ogre Battle game that was made by the same people who made Overblood and Dr. Hauser?
The Overblood.
A game I think about every day I wake up on this God-given earth.
Sometimes you wake up and you think about Overblood. Not an RPG, sadly.
You know, we like to prattle on before we actually talk about the game on this show, but I think we could prattle on topic because there's a couple of little bumps here along the way. We may as well lead off talking about Quest and Matsuno-san, the man behind this series, basically. The man who Square killed, right? Like,
Yasumi Matsuno. Yeah.
Yasumi Matsuno. The poor bastard. Yasumi Matsuno, to be clear, didn't make this game. His involvement with this was not a zero number, but by the time this game was like in full production, he had been well and truly poached by Square.
He was at Square working on Vagrant Story at the time.
Yes.
Correct.
But still had enough connection with his former employer to work as a freelance writer for this game.
Correct. It is important to note, however, that he was the driving force behind the first Ogre Battle, the March of the Black Queen. And so,
Tactics Ogre.
Yeah, and Tactics Ogre. So having his name at least be represented on the game, or at least have his name attached to the game, was important even for this game, because at this point between Ogre Battle and Final Fantasy Tactics, the Matsuno tactics-based JRPG was becoming much more mainstream than ever before, and his specific style of it was the shit at this time.
Yeah, the Tactics Ogre it's one of those games that, like, if you know, you know. I don't want to name names, but let's say at another place I work called Hardcore Gaming 101, they do sort of a ranking of games show. They've been doing it for years, and it's got like 1,000 games on it now. That's all done in good fun. But numerous versions of Tactics Ogre have been nominated discreetly, and the people who have nominated those discrete versions are arch nemeses to each other because they're convinced that the Saturn version is entirely different and better than the PSP version, which is also entirely different and superior to the PlayStation version, which is also entirely different and superior to the Saturn. Like there's no agreement.
Yeah.
They're lunatics.
The Super Famicom version of Tactics Ogre is a technical dark magic creation.
Yeah. It was accomplishing things that, like, proper in-house Nintendo was trying and doing less successfully with the Fire Emblem games at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, and it makes sense given the kind of rapturous reception that Tactics Ogre got, that a white-hot Square was able to probably show up with the money truck to Matsuno's house and be like, yo, you want to work on Final Fantasy? And he did not turn down the money truck when it showed up. Yeah, his first game was a weird quasi-action RPG.
Conquest of the Crystal Palace.
Conquest of the Crystal Palace. I am looking at my copy of it right now.
Doji.
It's a weird game. The localization really kind of stripped out some of the more religious-y imagery. It was like a kind of standard Nintendo localization. But the jump from that to Ogre Battle is kind of insane. And then the jump from Ogre Battle to Tactics Ogre, as far as I'm concerned, was also like quite the leap.
And then from Tactics Ogre immediately into Final Fantasy Tactics.
Yeah, which is, I think, like, I feel like the brief from Square was, can you do this but make it a little more baby friendly and also Final Fantasy themed? Like, I think it's a less.
But we want you to
game.
we also want you to spend more time writing an actual story.
Yeah, and he met that brief too. Tactics got plot, but it also got tactics. He's an interesting guy. The portfolio of stuff that he's attached to, at least in the early part of his career, are all like, Famitsu darling like classics of like 90s and early aughts JRPG stuff. And then a thing happened to him where they just
yes.
So Final Fantasy 12.
They gave him the book. They said, here, write a numbered Final Fantasy 12. Write, direct, conceive, supervise, create this game. And it's a legendary thing, and I feel like, you know, what has been gleaned and transferred to Western audiences or even Japanese audiences is based on a lot of hearsay, but by the end of that game's production, he was no longer with Square.
And he took extended hiatus. The most commonly cited reason as to why he became temperamental and left Square was that after less than a month of working on Final Fantasy XII, almost half of the team left Square Enix to join Hironobu Sakaguchi at Mistwalker, and proper Square refused to budge in terms of giving him new staff members to fill those roles. So he was working with a skeleton crew making a proper numbered Final Fantasy game with a proper Final Fantasy games expectations and also a proper Final Fantasy games, you know, development schedule. Nothing.
Like,
Nothing.
He noped out.
Yeah, like, and Sakaguchi had been gone for like a moment at this point, but like, to be clear, this would have been the first quote unquote real one of these games since 10. Like 10-2 is a asset flip thing. It's like, I don't want to poo-poo on it too much. 11 is something very different, and if you're into 11's brand of insanity, that's fine, but like, I am not going to... I don't know if I could stomach you sitting and telling me Final Fantasy XI is like one of those necessarily. So, like, the burden of like make the next actual one of these quite large, and like the symbolic vote of no confidence you get when like most of the other people attached to this project are just going to dip and go work with the other guy to make Blue fucking Dragon. The most mediocre piece of JRPG software of that decade.
And on top of that,
Dragon yet.
Hey, don't you guys remember Ash Archaic Sealed Heat, the Mistwalker's attempt to make a tactics role-playing game for the DS?
No, but I want to now.
Oh man, look that up because it looks like garbage.
We should play the last story at some point. Like,
Yeah,
that's
probably,
not a goof.
I like the last story. I've played that start to finish. I think it's okay.
But yeah, since he left Square, dude has mostly just been like, you know, hanging around, doing some consulting work with other Japanese devs. But like the only games he's actually credited on as like design work is the PSP remake of Tactics Ogre and Crimson Shroud, the 3DS downloadable game that is super fucking cool.
Yeah.
We're not going to mention Unsung Story, the most successful Kickstarter and not a poorly managed clusterfuck.
Yeah, so that's the unfortunate.
If we ever do a crowd-funded Nightmare roundup,
oh my
that'll
God.
be on there. I'm to understand, like 9 years after that Kickstarter or whatever, it is a video game now.
Yeah, it is a thing.
And I think there is a Matsuno interview where he's like, yo, I just literally went in for a couple days. They paid the checks and I like whipped up some concept art and told them how to make a tactics game and then left. Which...
the early days of crowdfunding.
Unsung Story is available for $30 on Steam. This is an early access game available for $30. Which, whatever. I guess people, like, I have bought things on Kickstarter, but the idea of paying any amount of money for early access software, especially one with such a dubious fucking history as this, that's pee-pee pooper diaper crazy.
There are
something
only
else.
21 Steam reviews for this video game.
From Little Orbit, a mobile developer that basically bought lock, stock, and barrel the Unsung Story project from the original producers of said, and whose other work includes Fallen Earth Classic, which looks to be a free-to-play massive multiplayer online role-playing game developed by Reloaded Productions, i.e. something else they also bought for pennies on the dollar and are operating, probably because it's very cheap to run an MMO with 12 people playing it.
Yeah.
So
I would trust Kinji Inafune to make an actual worthwhile spiritual successor to Mega Man before I trust Unsung Heroes will actually come out in a full capacity.
Just holding out for Redash, man. AKA Red. Yeah.
Red Ash.
Yes.
Yes.
Because Mega Man Legends 3 can't ever actually die. We can never let anything just actually...
Just, no.
Like, look. Anyway. So, interesting guy. He had a background in, like, diplomacy, I think is what he studied in school.
Yeah, I think he said in an interview that I looked up
that reflects on his games at all.
Yeah.
From what I was able to pull from like a partially translated interview is like he was thinking of being a civil servant before he got into video games. And that's reflective in most of the games that he did.
Is this like how Daigo Umehara's day job is he works at a hospital?
Or it's like this is the George R.R. Martin bit that someone dropped in the Discord where like I don't really play a lot of video games regarding Elden Ring involvement, but I've played a lot of Romance of the Three Kingdoms, and it's like, yeah, I bet you would. Like, someone's got to show him Crusader Kings like right now because he'd probably be delighted. And surprise, he's of the generation apparently that was really struck by Xevious, which is to say he was someone who started his development shops in like the mid to late 80s. Or at least got interested in video games around that time. Yeah, didn't make this game though. Again, he wrote the original treatment. But by the time this was in full production, it was his cohort. However, you can really, really, really feel his like if you've touched any other project he has touched, you may as well accept that this is kind of his baby. Because I think the people who were putting this together after he left clearly. Yasumi Matsuno is damn near identical to the genuine article because this is a staggeringly involved strategy game with some RPG mechanics and is very plot deep for something on the N64. A famous system for its RPGs.
The only Nintendo 64 game that uses the word shit.
It's got cusses. It says a cuss.
Actually, maybe Shadow Man has cusses.
And considering...
Conker's Bad Fur Day, I think, says shit.
Conker's Bad Fur Day, yes. Conker's Bad Fur Day.
By the end, I think Nintendo was just like, just anything. Will you guys buy anything? If we make the squirrel cuss...
please make video games.
Like, will you please buy this copy of Rush 2049? But yeah, this is the one, right? Like, it's either this or Paper Mario that people hold up, sometimes one in both hands. And say, no, look, there's really RPGs on this system. For real, we have these. Look, like Nanner Nanner Boo Boo, you guys playing your so-called Final Fantasy VIIs and your Panzer Dragoon sagas.
Jeff,
you could even say that the Saturn had more quality.
No, the Saturn has
then.
way more quality video, like JRPGs.
Yeah. If you were living in Japan, it's not even a competition. If you were living in America, you get a little hazier, but even then, I think Panzer Dragoon Saga just smokes the shit out of the so-called RPG.
The one part of Shining Force 3 that came out in the US.
Good game. You know, Miss Sara is not completely hopeless. It's okay. It runs like shit, but it's okay.
Hiroshi Yamauchi was like, people who play RPGs are a bunch of hikikomori who live in their parents' basement, and that's why we don't make them for this cool-ass console. Definitely no sour grapes over Square leaving.
It's strange. You know, I've been looking through old Famitsu stuff, and, you know, anecdotally, historically, it's like, yeah, Nintendo, they went from success to success. They launched the Famicom. Everyone loved it. They launched the disk system. It was immediately popular, even if it had kind of a short tail. They launched the Game Boy. Everything on it was incredible for a while, and it sold like hotcakes. These are generally true. And then you look at the Super Famicom launch lineup, and like, Super Mario World, great game. F-Zero was actually rated higher than Super Mario World. Like, Japan broadly liked F-Zero a whole hell of a lot. But then you get into like Kablooey and Gradius 3 and Super R-Type and a bunch of Amiga ports, fucking Populous and stuff. It was a little bumpy out the gate for the Super Famicom. Things got better pretty quick, and you know it became a success. But I don't think it was this inevitability that Nintendo was going to just sit on top of that pyramid forever. And by the time the N64 launched, I think they sort of coasted on prior successes quite a bit. And they spent most of the next decade just eating shit in Japan. Just really getting their teeth kicked in. Which is kind of incredible when you look at where they were like 5 years prior.
This is something that we might get into if we ever cover any of the N64's three other RPGs, but the N64 was remarkably unpopular with Japanese developers.
Yeah,
like
Konami, Capcom, your meat and potatoes developers that Enix, people that floated, people that literally sold Nintendos for Nintendo basically on the quality of their work, didn't show up for 2 or 3 years. Enix, I think, published 2 or 3 games. I think 2, and it was Wonder Project J2 and Mischief Makers, the Japanese release of it, versus every Dragon Quest game and Shiren the Wanderer, which also came out.
The N64 was held up almost entirely on Western support.
ZP, what do you think of the Nintendo 64?
I was solidly a Nintendo kid during this period of time, and then with age, I think I've slowly but surely come to the PS1's side of things. But I, as someone who briefly worked in the world of tech, very briefly, it is worth mentioning how it turns out, cartridges like SSDs, they're actually better than CDs. And there are certain parts of the Nintendo 64 that were actually superior. And we'll talk a little bit about some of those superiorities, at least in terms of
just raw being able to load a bunch of shit in at once.
See, and then that was the big thing is Tactics Ogre kind of reminded me of in terms of base graphics or polygons per second, the N64 was vastly superior to the PS1. And you get that sense whenever you go to these very raw polygonal open worlds in N64 games, and they're just bigger than the PS1, right? The PS1 system can only process under 200,000 polygons, whereas the N64 is over a million.
N64 Saturn generation is very interesting when it comes to cross-console versions of games.
Yes.
And if you want to see some stark differences between the way this one game will be between those 3 consoles, and there aren't a ton of them,
and there aren't a ton of games that take advantage
games
of that.
that are for all 3.
There aren't a ton of games that take advantage of that weird anti-aliasing system that the N64 used, or even the RAM slot that you could put in and get extra RAM and processing speed. But I guess it comes down to the ease of programming. Yeah, dude, the PS1 was a simpler and structurally wise, easier to process thing. And even the video decoder and sound chip are more sophisticated than what Nintendo was putting out.
Sure. Well, I mean, that's the crazy thing about so the N64 doesn't have sound hardware. All the sound hardware on every N64 game you've ever played is paid for and put onto the physical cartridge. So if you wanted, sample-based audio, you had to shell out for it. And then it had to be put on those games, so they were fucking expensive to produce. It's why, the good-sounding N64 games were, always pointed out, your Rogue Squadrons and the like. They had impressive sound hardware, and Factor 5 made a non-zero amount of money just licensing their sound tech to other developers at the time, because, everyone else struggled, maybe not a fair way to put it, but coaxing decent sounding stuff out of the N64 was not a fait accompli or whatever. And I even think a lot of the first party Nintendo stuff, I don't know, I'm not going to sit here and say that Mario 64 sounds bad, but it's kind of
Pokemon
basic.
Stadium 2 cost me, or rather my parents, $70 in 2001 money.
I think I paid $80 for WWF.
It just has a lot of audio in it.
Ogre Battle 64 is one of the largest, not the, but one of the largest games produced for the N64 ever, and it's a 320 megabit cartridge, so it's 40 megabytes. For reference, you could fit that on a single PlayStation disc 15 times. Like, it's crazy how much content they wring out of a very large Super Nintendo size cartridge, basically, which is what we're dealing with. Like, most of the big N64 games are smaller than some of the big Super Famicom games.
And I feel like we've...
N64 cartridges were Pokemon Stadium 2 and Resident Evil 2.
Yeah, I think there's a third one, but those two are I think they top out at the 64 megabytes.
The N64 version of Resident Evil 2, total tangent here. That version of that game is, once again, just like complete dark technical wizardry.
Yeah. Lord's
the
Prayer
way
on Green
they
of Rice.
cram all of it.
But you had to pay for each one of those ROM chips, basically, and this was why developers and publishers were not super stoked to work with Nintendo at the time, because you paid Nintendo for the privilege of having those cartridges made, and then it was kind of incumbent on you to make sure they sold. So producing Resident Evil 2 and then selling it was probably a money-losing proposition at that point when you considered how expensive chips were.
A lot of that was also probably just like maybe groundwork for that hot new N64 exclusive Resident Evil 0.
Famous N64 title. Not even for the DD, but just a proper cartridge, apparently.
We've actually talked about this before, but playing Ogre Battle 64 and just looking at the enormity of the world, again, I think that it's apocryphal that we sometimes, hear people say that, oh, the PS1 and the N64, this is when everybody was playing around with 3D polygonal graphics. And it's like, not really. Like, the idea that the N64 was this platform that required people to do 3D graphics, or even the PS1, like, it's just not true. I know we talked about that when we did Suikoden, but not everyone was enthusiastic to do it.
Like, if anything, the Saturn people were more dogmatic about that shit in some sense.
Yes, Enix in particular, or even Square, were like, yeah, we're gonna make this tactics game, Final Fantasy Tactics. We're not making it 3D. What the fuck are you talking about?
Sure. Or you'd wind up with a blend of the two, right? Which is ultimately what this is.
Yeah, and I thought that this was, as Braden said, technically impressive considering the time in which it came out. So in Japan, 1999, in North America. Like, we also need to talk about, this got localized.
Yes.
This got an actual localization.
Again, something of an apocryphal, if true, statement. The N64 did not have RPGs. So, compared to both of its peers, and even, like, the handhelds of the day, yeah. But when you start digging down in terms of stuff that didn't get localized, there's quite a few ARPGs. There's a bunch of custom robo games and shit that we never got and we're never going to get. And I don't think a lot of these have been fan translated yet, because why would they? But there's stuff on here for you if you were interested in role playing and just for whatever reason hated the idea of owning a PlayStation. It was just kind of thin on the ground. And then in order to localize those, particularly at the scale of something like Ogre Battle 64, like, I don't know, the things that were hitting over here in the United States at the time on the N64 were a lot of kart racers, a lot of shooters,
yeah,
a lot of platformers.
A lot of character platformers.
Yeah. So let's take this
Blast Core
dark strategy game where
Blast
they
Core
cuss.
is rad.
Blast Core kicks ass.
Weird people who will talk to you about Space Station Silicon Valley.
Yeah, the DMA design stuff.
It was made by Rockstar before they were Rockstar.
It's a neat game. It's neat.
Is that an RPG, Jeff?
No. We have to talk about Body Harvest at some point. We should probably talk about Ogre Battle 64 too.
Talk about nightmare creatures.
God.
The wheel of dubious third-person action games from the 32 64-bit era.
But anyways, this game is like a technical masterpiece considering the time in which it came out. And I think the compromise it makes for having these massive worlds is that it has traditional 2D sprite work with these 3D backgrounds, and some of which, and we'll talk about how this makes it actually incredibly difficult to explore the world at times. But, for the most part, it works. The only times where I feel like it's hard to kind of process what I'm looking at is sometimes like knowing like different levels of the playing field And this is something that I even feel like was a problem in Final Fantasy Tactics. It's like, okay, you're up this how many levels, and now I'm going to use my arithmetician or geomancer to manipulate the ground, and oh boy, this looks weird.
God, I love the geomancer
There's like some
class.
depth perception. Yes. Hey, man.
Sorry.
Death by math, my man. Death by math. Jeff, when we get there, I'm not playing that game legitimately. I'm
That's fine.
full cheese.
Lots of ways to skin a cat.
Full cheese. Anyways, no, it's impressive, but I do feel like exploring the world, I don't know how you guys felt, but the overworld for Ogre Battle 64 was a lot.
Let's take one step back and I guess talk about what this game is.
Okay.
Sure, yeah. Braden, literally
Braden,
either of you spent more time with this.
Do you want me to do this?
Yes, Braden.
Okay. So Ogre Battle 64 is so I have not messed around with March of the Black Queen, but that seems like something that I should look at, but it seems way less complicated than even this. But Ogre Battle is kind of a failed evolutionary branch of the Japanese strategy RPG, where you are building bespoke units of up to 5 characters, and they fight based on what row you put them in and what behavior you set for the unit. And you move them around on a map that moves in real time, but you can pause, and when they run into an enemy unit, they will engage in a couple rounds of combat and then back off, and whoever did the more damage moves forward, and whoever loses gets knocked back on the map. And so it's a game about unit building. It's a game about macro management, but also micromanagement, because you can get real fucking fiddly with the composition of your units. And later on, they include stuff like legions, and there are a bunch of special classes and monster classes, and monsters take up 2 spots, but they're incredibly fucking powerful. Am I missing anything?
There's also a plot.
There's also
plot.
We'll
talk about the plot later, but I feel
yeah.
it's important to talk about mechanically how this game
In typical
plays.
off the deep end form, we'll talk about the plot for about 2 minutes at the end and be like, yeah, it's okay. So,
it is this kind of, it's difficult to describe because it's not fully just a Final Fantasy Tactics standby, because there's a real-time strategy element to it.
Yes.
There's kind of more of a timing-based, like more action-y based mechanical structure to the game.
Part of it is about setting your unit's behavior to maximize the kind of damage they do.
Yeah, it's
which
I was gonna my idea for labeling us as different shipping considerations, because in a lot of ways it feels kind of like putting ideas in the mail and then hoping that they eventually get where they need to go in terms of performing in battle, or literally arriving at a point at an opportune moment or prior to an opportune moment. There
is in-game tutorial stuff that
oh my god
kind of breaks down that stuff.
Yes.
If you dig into the menus and go to the Hugo report, the advisor man will actually break down the mechanics in a way that I looked at finally 20 hours in and said, oh, I should have looked at this immediately.
Yeah, so that was the first thing I did. I poked around the Prima official strategy guide for this game a little bit prior to playing it, because I was curious like just how deep the rabbit hole went. And then I saw the page count on that strategy guide, and I was like, oh. So I went into this game somewhat committed, and I stuck to this for the most part, playing it as an emergent experience, and not optimizing at all. And that's, maybe in some sense led to my... I wasn't a huge fan of this game in some sense. But the first thing I did was go through the first bundle of the tutorials in this game. And I gotta say, there's a lot of them. And B, if you're not using that or that strategy guide, I think you're going to have a pretty miserable time figuring out what to do. Like
Jeff, I also tried to go in mostly blind. And then by the time I got to Act 3, I was like, fuck it. I'm going to GameFAQs.GameSpot.com, and I am looking up how to find some of this stuff. This is also a thing that is in Tactics Ogre, But
you could say that this is trope appropriate in a lot of ways.
To some extent, like having hidden shit, like a bunch of unexplained mechanics and hidden shit is par for the course, I would say, in a lot of games of this era. Like, even the Fire Emblems of the Super Famicom era
off. Yeah.
have their share of hidden stuff. If you bring Lex to this very specific spot on map 1, he will get the Brave Axe.
Bush that actually secretly has this character. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's got that.
I will gripe about that shit eventually, but
however,
Christ.
I think that we're kind of dancing around like the gameplay for this game. Like I kind of broke it down into like the 4 distinct parts of this game that make it slightly different than, say, Fire Emblem or Final Fantasy Tactics.
Yeah.
The first one is like the overall storyline structure and the use of objectives to move the plot along and also encourage you to explore the world, which we'll get to when we talk about the plot line. The first real main differentiation point here is just the way that battles are structured. So normally, say, with like Fire Emblem, you move a unit, it meets another unit, quick animation plays, and it's over, right?
Yeah.
With this, when 2 units meet, it starts a skirmish, but the game hard cuts to this isometric pre-rendered battlefield, and then you as the player select attacks in semi-real-time combat, and then there are also like multiple characters that can act at once in a turn-based format. So if you have 2 mages, you can combo spells, or if you have 2 units in the back row, what they can do is different than if they were 2 units in the front row. And, there's critical hits, there's a bunch of dice rolling. If you win, you win. And if you even break down the number of enemy units that are in front of you to just 1, you could convince them to join your side. But if, like, your unit dies, a unit is disbanded once, each member dies, or
once the leader is...
Or if the leader is dead, you get a hard cut to a game over.
Well, if Magnus dies, then it's a game over. If the leader of one of your units dies, you lose control of them, and they retreat back to your headquarters.
Which leads to the other thing that we've been dancing around, which is unit formation.
Yes.
So Magnus, the protagonist, can command battalions and can have up to 50 troops, which when you compare that to what Fire Emblem and even Tactics was doing, even the motherfucking, like, Disgaea games, 50 troops is insane.
It is a lot.
That is 10 units of 5.
And then members of these battalions are kind of, they're cordoned off, right, into these units. Each unit must have a leader and can have up to 3 characters next to them.
Yeah.
4? Oh, yeah, you're right. 5 total.
You can have up to 5 monster units take 2 spaces.
That's right. Because I used a lot of
way
monster
more
units.
powerful.
I sometimes forgot that. But yes, you're right.
Hey, what
5
determines
total.
Which characters get to be leaders?
Anyone can be
humans.
leaders as long as they're not Gorgons and Satoros.
It's
it's
an
any
attribute
human leader
that they can accumulate.
Monsters can't be leaders.
Sure.
Yes.
Obviously.
Minus the most non-human leaders. But then what is a monster when you start to get into like demi-humans versus netherworlders or even the undead and beasts?
Right.
It's complicated. It frays apart in terms of that part. But the overall thing is you've got a leader, and that leader can have with it, including the leader, 5 units strong. Right? And obviously when you combine 2 units together, there are bonuses with you creating that battalion versus just having 50 units all by themselves go at it one at a time. For example, I'm going to use the soldier as an example. The base starting unit that you get is a soldier. If you have 1 soldier unit, they get like 2 experience points for every battle won. However, if you combine 4 soldier units together, they get 24 for every battle won.
What?
It's multiplicative. You guys didn't know that? So 4 soldier units within one party can get 24 experience points.
It fucking starts
for your battles.
Yep. You're making up.
I'm not making this up.
You're not making this up, and that's what upsets me. So
combat
basic ass
is
soldier
pulled among
units.
all soldier units within a party. So once 100 experience points is gained, Then you transform your units.
Yeah, then the soldiers promote into
Useful
your
units.
lowest level male
Yeah.
or female units based on if the leader of the unit is male or female. And generally, the better magic classes are on the female side, and the
better
male
physical
classes,
DPS.
yeah, male classes have better physical DPS.
There's some questionable decisions there.
There's some questionable gender branching.
This is old school D&D, the legacy of Dungeons and Dragons,
Yeah.
right? Like
There's a reason why
even by third edition they were like running screaming from that shit in like the handbooks.
There's a reason why in the Tactics Ogre remake all classes are just gender neutral.
Yeah.
But anyways, so yes, you can form these battalions. And we've kind of gotten to the final, and probably the thing, if you were to talk to weird people that really like this game, including ZP,
and me,
if you're going to talk about the number one part of this game that gets us salivating at the chops, let's talk about the class-based system in this. So every soldier unit can evolve Pokemon style into one of three categories: male, female, and non-human. And non-human has a lot of stuff to it, and then even within male and female has a lot of stuff to it.
Yeah.
But once they get enough experience points,
they turn into the basic class for the male and female units. For the males, it's a soldier boy. For the women, it is archer lady.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
the soldier boys have this ability called Superman, and they every time they attack, they go, "You!"
Superman, that's wrong. Yo, man, this time rewind potion is so crazy.
So there are a couple of items that can expedite this process, but it's a given. You can even find the Ascendant Cross, which allows you to reverse the gender of your units if you accidentally evolved them.
Yes, the Ascendant
and you didn't
Cross.
want them. I think the only big thing that is worth noting before we get into the nitty gritty is there are some really weird classes here. Like the Centurion is only available through promoting units.
If the Centurion class, it is available to men and women, and it is if that character has promoted 10 soldier units over the course of their
7. It's 7.
7? Okay. Promoted 7 soldier units. Then they get access to the Centurion class, which lets you command legions, which is a whole nother fucking thing.
So when are we going to talk about the chaos alignment system and the chaos frames here?
We may as well do it now because it's one more thing.
Every class in this game is has a built-in alignment range that they are allowed to be in. So generally, chaotic classes are magic users a lot of the time, or berserkers, ninjas, sorceresses. Order classes are knights and healers, and then more neutral classes are your archers, your dragon tamers, your beast tamers, etc.
Yes. This is one of the frustrating parts of the game. The other, it's a stat that is largely not manifested. The game does manifest strength, vitality, intelligence, mental, and then agility
numbers.
And dexterity.
Yeah.
There are 2 stats that are actually important to the game that it doesn't really manifest at all. One being luck, which is completely invisible to you unless you break into the game's code. And the other is chaos frame, or your chaos frame alignment. The chaos frame alignment does have a little blip right next to above the character portrait. If you see the letter N, that means your character is neutral. If you see L, they are lawful. And if you see C, they are chaotic. And the game doesn't even explain how it calculates that math. So the actual math is 1/2 times the number of liberated towns plus -2 times the number of captured towns.
Well, that's the overall chaos frame. That's the chaos frame that determines the ending of the game. Individual units chaos are based on the units they have, the characters they have in their units. So if you have more chaotic characters or classes in your unit, then everyone's alignment will over time shift to chaotic.
The overall theme is like what Braden said, which is magic is considered chaos, fighting people with swords is considered lawful, and then the weird red mages in between classes are considered neutral.
Did you get all of that?
Did you get all that?
Also, if your characters die, they become undead, which leads to
they
its
may
own
have a
little
chance
class
of
tree.
becoming undead. So, yeah, if a character dies and you don't revive them by the end of the map, they have a chance of turning into a zombie. Zombies are good meat shield units. If a zombie gets hit with a fire spell, they turn into a skeleton. And skeletons are meat shield units, but better. And if a skeleton gets hit with holy damage, they turn into a ghost. And ghosts are
they
kind
can
of
turn
bad,
into an angel. They can turn into an angel. There's
and
a
women
percentage
can
chance
turn
that
into
they can turn
angels.
into an angel. But that's only after. So they have to be a lawful character.
Female character.
A lawful
with
female
high enough
character.
stats.
They must die in battle. And preferably, apparently, like, die as a result of holy magic.
Okay.
But also, yes.
I did not get an Angel Knight class. So.
Yeah, you're better off not. And then, there's the quest for the vampires.
Yep. There's
vampires.
You
can go
to
the Far Heights Mansion. And
I ended my game. I finished my session last night. I recruited a werewolf man.
Okay. That's good. That's a good unit.
He's a unique character. He seems like a bastard, but more so than a lot of other games of this type, there are a lot of weird, fiddly, bespoke classes.
Absolutely.
And
I
think that's
hate it.
cool.
So we're going to talk about how I played this game probably the incorrect way. But
okay, yeah.
Now hear me out.
You explain your sin.
Hear me out. No, we're not shaming me. Here's my reasoning for the justification for this is if you were to play this game, not necessarily blind, but even just like exploring the world and doing the story, you're only going to get what? Like 1/4 of what is in the game.
If that.
And so every single time that you play the game, you're going to explore a different quarter, a different part of the world, a different part of the environment, and you're going to get different units. And that part of the game, I think, it makes perfect sense. They made this big world, and they want to encourage multiple playthroughs.
The moment for me where I realized that it was that was the case was when it became eventually clear that it's actually worth your time to go back and revisit maps that aren't even germane to like your current mission, and that there's anything left for there to find. Not only is there anything left, there's kind of clutch stuff to find. Like, to wit, if you've got someone who died and did not turn into a zombie, what you've got is a corpse, a dead leader, and that unit is basically out of commission. So you need to resurrect this character. And to do that, you need to return to a map and go to a town, which may not necessarily be the one you'd start in, and in fact most of the times it is not, where there is a witch's den, where you can then resurrect a character. But then you learn that in order to resurrect a character, they've got to be in your little 5-unit stack for a given unit. So, to resurrect a character, the workflow that I have landed on, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here, is enter the unit formation screen, delete the unit wherein the dead leader was the leader of that unit, go to unit of choice, remove minion units, put the dead leader in that unit, then go to the world map, go to a region, move your unit to the town with the witch, and then pay the money to resurrect the leader, then leave the town, then leave the region, then go back to the unit formation screen, then remove that leader as a minion from the unit you stuck him in, then build a new unit, then put your resurrected unit leader in that unit, and then give him mooks.
I mean, that's the structure for almost all of the special classes.
Okay,
or
that
the
takes
secret
like
classes.
fucking 30 years to do.
Yes.
Yeah, but that's just what they did for all of these, like, if you want to get the princess or you want to get the dragoon, it's like a 12-step process. Just getting, as someone who took the time to get the vampire, I had to write down what time it was and then look up the answers for the questions on the clock so as that I could get the stuff for that. For the Lich, I had to finish the Celis mission in Chapter 3 and then re-enter the map but specifically send Magnus by himself to Bana Bana. And then I got a letter, and then I had to re-enter the Zenobian border map and send Magnus to Quellion. And then I got the Ring of the Dead by delivering the letter to a specific character, and then that gave me the Lich.
There's little tells all over. Even the first map of this game, as you move units out of the starting... so this region map has got, like, nodes on it, and you're basically passing units from node to node, the nodes being towns, which you are either liberating or capturing, depending on if they are neutral or hostile. And each one of those towns has some vital stats listed on it. It's got a population number, and it's got a morality number. Or not a morality, like a morale. I'm smart enough to know that these numbers aren't window dressing. These numbers mean something. They're affecting something somewhere. I'm affecting them. Just from that alone, I'm already like, man, I don't know about this game. I don't know if this is something I'm going to savor. There's so much to this title. I mean, the shit we have already described, it is, without a doubt, there is nothing even close to it on the N64 in terms of depth. This is the deepest. This is the Marianas Trench of the N64. Like, I dare you to cite anything that is even in the same ballpark.
Are we going to have a Game of the Year award to most mechanically dense?
I mean, this wins. Like,
until we decide that Hearts of Iron is an RPG.
Like, there's nothing even in the same universe. It's really kind of I mean, like on the N64, there are more complicated. Like this in terms of
on the N64, sure.
Like as soon as you enter like the personal computer or virtually any other platform, like even competing games on the PlayStation, like yes, this is not like unheard of shit. But for this console,
so Jeff, I do agree with you that there is a level of fiddliness to this game that I think. Well, this game's never gonna get fucking remade. No one gives a shit about Ogre Battle. People give a shit about Tactics Ogre. Square, please put Tactics Ogre on the Switch, you bastards. Yeah. What's a triangle strategy? Who gives a shit about triangular strategies? The only strategies I care about are the strategies I have when I commit war crimes and feel bad about them in the law route.
I think there's really good odds this winds up on the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack TM
yeah,
service.
It would not surprise me. But there, like the fact that you have to, once again, band together a unit of all of your characters who died in battle, drag them over to a witch hut, and then revive them between fights is a level of like shitty maintenance and fiddliness that, to some extent, I feel like is not out of course from what other games like this were doing, but it adds up and it is annoying.
Yeah. And it's not like that's the only thing you could, like, wandering around on those maps, as you mentioned, there are characters, there are hidden, very useful items that are
you can get monsters. Yeah. That's how you get monsters.
Like, I found a griffin at some point that became pretty useful.
Yeah, the beasts are very good. Also, you could play a significant part of this game and not have a unit that flies or a flying type unit. You could spend a significant part of this game without, getting a golem or, the demi-humans.
I never got a golem.
Maybe you never got the pumpkin head. You probably should have.
I did not get pumpkin head.
I never had.
And then there's the whole love and peace mechanic where there are specific units that you can't encounter in the wild, but you have to convince them to join your party.
You can only get by converting them using a rare item,
which is not easy to get. So there's a limited number of times that you'll be able to reasonably get like Satoros and Black Knights into your army. But if you do, you get a Doomstag.
They're pretty good.
And, the build paths and like the tech trees for your characters are very fiddly.
Character stat growths are semi-random based on what class they are.
So
which
you can't really even bank on. It's like, I really need a siren right now, but her stat growth is not going to lead her to become a siren.
Certain characters in my party, it's just like, oh, you don't have enough stats to promote to this higher level version of your class, or because of the way you have been put in this unit, your alignment is now out of sorts, and I have to use a chaos urn to lower your alignment enough so that you can promote to the advanced version of this job class. I think we kind of have gone over the fiddliness of this game. I keep on saying fiddliness. It's a bad word. If you don't like to fiddle, get out of the country jamboree.
I'm trying to be positive here because ultimately this is like a very, very...
No, Jeff, you're allowed to be negative. Negativity creates content.
Here's my thing. That I did not enjoy playing this game. And...
Which is weird because when we first started, I was the one who was not enjoying this game. And you were enjoying it. And then I got addicted, and then you got...
I think as soon as I saw just how... I don't know why I'm like this. I don't know why I'm the way I am. It's just how I was made.
I would anticipate. I'm surprised that you reacted the way that you did, Jeff, just because you have repeatedly referred to yourself as a grindfather.
Yes.
And to be perfectly honest, this game is a grindfathery game.
It is a very grindfathery game.
It's even more grindfathery in the same way as, like, say, Final Fantasy X and getting ultimates or the ultimate weapons.
Here's the difference. Is this game grindy? Oh, you bet your sweet ass this game is grindy. Jesus Christ. But it's not mindlessly grindy. This is maybe the most mindfully grindful game.
Mindfully grindful is the name of my new...
There you go. This game made me more thirsty than I've ever been to play, like, literally any ARPG, literally any arcade game you could put in front of me. The very deliberate, even at the fastest speed pace with which these unit stacks plod along this map to then get into fights where you have a tenuous ability to affect the outcome if you've not pre-planned stuff correctly. Let's be clear. You can play this game very well. Like you two at a certain point started playing a very different game than I was playing because you are engaging with the mechanics of this game in a way that I could not flog myself into doing it. Because by about 10 hours in, I was just like, you know what? I think I get it. This is not for me. If I was like in college still, if I was younger and literally wanted to sit in front of an N64 for like 40 hours, I would probably be having the time of my life. There's a version of me that is like very into this thing, and it's just not something I want anymore. But that is not me saying it's bad. I think this game's actually pretty damn good. Like, at what it does, it's kind of incredible. And the multiple ending aspect of it, I think in some sense it's kind of shitty that this game expects you to literally just wander around empty maps to find useful items and monsters to put in parties and expect random coin flips to produce stuff.
You're not wrong.
But on the other hand, that's kind of fucking awesome. Like, the line from this to, like, a Crusader Kings sort of random event generator, like, emergent narrative thing is pretty short. And they did that on the N64 in a 40 megabyte cartridge. Like, that's insane. Like, I think this overall is, like, a quality product. But, like I said, got about 10 hours in, made it to Act 2, and I was like, I'm not playing this anymore.
I feel like this is why we had to invoke Matsuno, even though he only did like a little bit of writing for this game, is there is a common through line of the games he has designed, especially, Tactics Ogre and Final Fantasy Tactics and this and Vagrant Story. I think Vagrant Story is probably the most apt comparison just because there's been a podcast on it on this network.
Check it out.
There is a depth and a density to these mechanics that is somewhat explained, but not fully explained. And if you want to turn into a horrific supervillain like ZP did, and just look at the raw numbers, look at the raw code, tell me exactly how much experience a unit of soldiers will get, you can do that. You can also just be like, I'm going to put a bunch of fighty mans in the front, a healer in the back, and then I'm going to throw them at the enemies. You will do mostly okay. By the end of my time with the game, which I'm still going to finish it, I
One step ahead of you.
I said, fuck it, I'm gonna look this shit up, because at some point I felt like I was going to miss out on like interesting content.
Yeah.
If I did not. But I think the strategy part of this game and the way battles are kind of a back and forth grind, I think that is cool. I think it is unique. And also, I would have trouble recommending this to someone who, let's say, was not
I
down
would not
for
recommend this either. I would say that there is a specific person who should play this game, or this game would benefit you playing it. And those people have already played this game 18 million times already.
Is this an Earthbound situation where the only people who care about Ogre Battle 64 and have talked about it did not play it at the time and have not played it legitimately?
It depends. I feel like there are people who like modern era Fire Emblem. There is a handful of them that might benefit from going to the past and seeing what tactics games were like in the past. And I'm not even going to be... ZP's going to talk about Thracia. It's not even that. Like, I think that there are games that took the format of tactics and storytelling and like player exploration and progression and did interesting things that might, if you like Fire Emblem Three Houses, there are some of you out there that might want to check this out. Maybe a little.
I would give this a strong recommend to anyone who likes. I'll just say it, a little slightly too dense Japanese tactics game.
If you like Hearts of Iron, for example, and if your favorite part of Europa Universalis
people who like Hearts of Iron like it when they can play as Nazi Germany. So
they also like taking Nepal and like going down the path road of being like communist, or if you like unlocking the secret nation factions in like Europa Universalis, this game is for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Like if you're into the Daisen Ryaku games, all two of you listening to this show, this is for you.
This game allows for and rewards a level of micro and just number crunching that I think is unparalleled for an N64 game, 100%, and definitely on the higher end of tactical RPGs from this era. But also you can just put three big dudes in the front, a healer in the back, and maybe an archer in the middle.
But what if you put two magic casters next to each other and had them cast mixed element basic
and
or
I found out about that because you talked about that, and it turns out most of those spells pretty good.
Yeah. What if you wanted to cast a toxic...
There's another hidden stat, a morale stat based on how long all these characters have been in the same unit together.
There's even 3 different types of magic. Yep. There's basic, advanced, and witch. And witch spells do status effects. Basic does just regular elemental stuff. Witches are very, very good. But what if you comboed a witch magic spell into another witch magic spell, and so it does multiple status effects?
AOE
you sleep them
effects,
and you poison them. And then, you got your splash damage. So if it's small range, it's full damage at the center, and then the side targets are half damage. But if you get wide range, then you get your full cross damage for full damage, and only the corners are half damage.
I feel like in some sense this game has done a disservice by using like a strategy guide, in the sense that I think the real like perk, or like, I don't know, a beautiful way to play this game would be discovering all of this shit organically with friends.
Don't kink shame me.
Kink shame.
Don't kink shame me. You're kink shaming.
Okay, if are you on 2chan in 1999?
That's what I'm saying. Like that sort of, this is a bad comparison, but hear me out. There's like a Dark Souls-esque joy of discovery to this game in some sense. Like I really do think that. Like the emergent shit. Like I don't know. The first time I had 3 soldier units in the front row, and they all decided to do like a gang up attack, and someone was like, "Oh, I didn't know that would happen. That's cool." And setting archer, like learning all this shit organically, and then like being able to tell someone that this thing happened. I think that's the version of this game that like that's the vision.
But Jeff, I wanted all of the Elm Pedras. I wanted all of them.
The Elm Pedras, yes, the magic system,
Yes.
the very, very
Yes.
opaque magic system.
Yes, the Elm Pedras, one of them requires you to go to a random town with a unit that has a hellhound in it.
Yeah, most people are going to get their first Elm Pedras. But what if you had all of them?
You get your first one when you literally start the game.
Yeah. And then you get the second one if you train at Militia after.
Yeah, if you train Magnus but specifically the built-in grinding function where you pay money to engage in a fight.
And they're not necessarily going to pop off the Elm Pedras the
You
first
have to
time.
have Magnus do a bunch of training fights in one area, and then eventually he will fight a tougher enemy
that
who
will
will
get you
give
the
you the
second
other
Elm
element.
Pedra, and then the third you have to move to Mount Ithaca, and the fourth one is at the Glues Hill. And then after you get the fourth one, you learn about the Pedra of Bane and Pedra of Virtue, which you then can get the Pedra of Bane. I think it was mission 12 or 13.
You give that boy that hellhound.
The Pedra of Virtue, I think, is much later at like mission 21 or 22.
But
I could be wrong about that. And then once you get those, you get the gods and the avatars of the deities of Ogre Battle.
You could talk about this game for hours.
You could learn. You can pledge allegiance to Harnella, the wind goddess, or Berthae, the earth goddess, Grueza, the water goddess.
We haven't even talked about legions yet.
We haven't even talked.
Because legions are bad.
No, we need to talk about them because it's a real bummer when you invest in. What about the Zetagenian calendar system?
What?
This game has its own calendar system. The month of Dios, Terra, Flama.
You're just making this up.
Oceano.
Again, if there's a number or any enumerated like text in this game, it's pertinent to gameplay. Like there's no fluff. Basically, like everything has some mechanical function to it, and it's insane. Like it's a crazy impressive thing. I don't want anything to do with it, but I'm not going to sit here and say it adds up to bad. It adds up to like a miracle. Like this had me for like a while, like engaging with as many of these systems as I felt comfortable engaging. And at a certain point, they stacked to enough of a hill that I voluntarily said I think I would rather go. Can I play Galaga now? I'm gonna go stick Namco Museum in my N64 and just play Galaxian. This ain't gonna be for everyone. But if you think you
and I think that's okay. Jeff, can we at least admit that's
Definitely.
Okay?
Yeah.
Unlike another podcast, it's about to do a blood fight about Elden Ring.
Like if you're like for whatever reason interested in owning this physically, please allow me to dissuade you. The used prices on this one have gotten very, 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 very silly. I'm in a unique position where I work at a university that has a copy of Ogre Battle 64 just in their collection. So I've been sitting on a university stickered, tagged copy of Ogre Battle 64 for several months now because no one's trying to check it out. If I was an unethical person, I could probably go on to an online retailer and pay for part of my mortgage with this thing. Like, I don't even know what the price is anymore, but it's one of those. It's one of the Shi Tenno kind of games.
It did get an interesting Wii U port.
What's interesting about it?
It's just the fact that they released it. The fact that it exists.
It's on the Wii and Wii U Virtual Console. I played it on the Wii U. I set up the fucking Wii U to play this game. I paid $2 to update my Wii Virtual Console version to the Wii U Virtual Console.
That's such a fun thing.
Now, unless you want to continue flogging ZP about his bad decisions, which I'm all here for, I do think it is time for us to transition into, this game has a story, and it's actually quite good.
Yeah.
This game's story is... Once again, it's very Matsuno, which is to say, like, it is about nations and rebellions and class struggle and ominous childhood backstories.
Okay, but can I say a thing that's going to make you specifically upset? It's just kind of a railroady version of Fire Emblem Fates. They don't
Fire
even
Emblem
give you the
Fates
choice.
doesn't even bother naming the continent those nations are on.
It's the continent of Fightland. Like, yeah.
I have played enough of Tactics Ogre to know, like, the aesthetic and the style of worlds that they're going for. And hey, do you like Faustian bargains and wondering if your principles are more important than the principles of the rebellion you're being a part of? And at some point an evil god still gets resurrected because it's still a tactics, it's still an Ogre Battle game.
Still a role-playing game made in Japan.
Still
in this
Japanese role-playing game.
I do like how it expands your party, how you get new characters. You're usually stuck, I think, regardless of the chapter, Magus, Diomedes, and Leah.
Diomedes can leave your party.
Yes, but Diomedes does come back.
He didn't for me. He hasn't.
Really?
No.
Very early on, I kind of figured that Diomedes was going to be an interesting mechanical character. So, and like, you know,
Oh, did you not kill Frederick?
I chose to duel Diomedes at the very first chapter, and then I selected the ... response.
That's the
when I was told to execute Frederick, and Diomedes does not leaves your party.
Well, not only does Diomedes not join your party, like Aisha doesn't join your party, because also Frederick is a piece of shit. You should kill him. Saradin doesn't join. Like, killing Frederick, you should kill Frederick. I don't understand why you didn't kill Frederick.
So, can you explain the significance of killing Frederick to people who are not hours deep in Ogre Battle 64?
There is a choice at the end of Act 1 that is basically like you have found the rebel leader, and the shitty shit eater above you's like, all right, big boy, why don't you murder the leader of the rebels to prove how loyal you are? And, you know, like any Matsuno game, you have the option of like saying I cannot do this, or saying ... Either way, you join the rebellion and say, fuck it, fuck y'all, I'm a person of lordly caliber. I'm a fight for the people.
You should at least pick something other than ...
If you pick ... then Diomedes seemingly sacrifices himself to let you go. And yeah, you can't recruit certain characters, but other characters will be available depending on who you recruit. Like, for example, the werewolf guy will not join your party if you have certain characters, and the werewolf guy seems pretty good. And also, so there's a little bit of that. I believe the broad arc of the game's plot is the same regardless of like your moral decisions, but it is decently reactive in a lot of the pre-fight banter as far as like certain characters. If certain characters aren't there, they're not going to pipe in.
There's a prologue, there's chapter 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and then a final chapter. And yeah, you're right. It's like the general format of you're a person that's a part of this army. You find out that the army is evil. You join a rebellion group and slowly but surely work your way up to the top. And then
whoops, Lotus decides to come in and say, we're taking control. And Lotus is basically the recurring antagonists for all of these games, all of the Ogre series, because they're basically like they're a bunch of dark knights who have a dark pope.
I think where this gets interesting is the final act, where I want to praise this game as fiddly and weird and like just diametrically opposed to what I normally want out of the conclusion of a game. Like, the way this game breaks apart in its conclusion, like the multiple different pathways and endings you can get, it's kind of impressive how many different like variables they calculated to have all of these different endings.
The knobs.
And there are, and in true Matsuno fashion, none of the endings are gonna make you feel good.
Yes, they've all you got dirty. Like, your character got dirty by the end of this game.
You got down in the muck.
Despite being of such lowly caliber.
You might have fought a dark god, but at what cost?
Yeah.
Did either of you achieve an ending in this game? It will surprise the listeners to hear that I did not.
I have not finished.
I did. I got lawful.
Okay, you got the lawful, not neutral or chaos.
I
'Cause
got lawful.
there's an extra ending, apparently, if you
Yes.
have a low chaos frame, which the game never presents to you at any point what the chaos frame is, but that
Right.
determines the last act and the ending. And there's an extra map at the end of the game if you are in the chaos,
Yes.
the high chaos.
So for lawful, after Frederick dies, there's a new war between East Gallia and Zetaginia, and Zetaginia wants to invade Palatinus,
Yep.
and after Lodi's finally weakens it, Magus actually is renamed Magnus Gallant, the Paladin King, and he goes on to be remembered as like the lordly king. But you can tell he's depressed because everybody dead.
Yeah.
And it's also, oh shit, what have I become? And he realizes he's actually becoming the evil king he chose to oppose in the beginning.
Like going beat for beat, kind of there's a lot of twists and turns, but it is a lot more about broad themes of, hey,
Power corrupts.
class struggles, knights are dicks, ominous childhood backstories are going to come back to bite you in the ass.
The class stuff they really hit you over the head with early on, and like, I not to say that that's an idea without merit. I think it's actually a really interesting space to explore. Like again, just in the context of this was a game that came out on the Nintendo 64, and you've got like every town you enter, you can speak with a random denizen of the town, and most of them are just like, God, like I have very articulated specific opinions on how the aristocracy treats the lower people of the world, or like I'm marginally sympathetic and think that this is like the correct way for the world to run. Like depth.
But there are also mustache twirling villains who are like, the poor people exist to lick my boots.
It's got both. The local and it's all localized well enough too.
Stabbed.
Like I feel like ideas are conveyed like this, rich people bad, poor people good. Like that's not necessarily like a very sophisticated worldview. However,
because it turns out the rebellion is also fucked up and messy.
And the localization does a good job of like capturing the messiness of all of this. That's what I'm suggesting.
And the protagonist from Ogre Battle 1 is also in the game. He's part of the rebellion in a different part of the world. It's there is some messy. It is messy. The rebellion is messy. Everything is. I would say the localization is a bit on the dry side, but it's from 2000. It's not quite the grand, like little more highfalutin writing style that I associate with the Tactics Ogre remake and War of the Lions.
Yeah, but on the other hand, I feel like they could not to say that Square localizations in the late night, like the post-Woolsey era, was
this was
dire.
Atlas. This was
right. Like that, it's a different tone.
Persona 1 era Atlas.
Yeah, and they managed to keep it from going into sort of occasional, I don't know. It's on there on par with something like Final Fantasy IX's localization, I think. Like in the sense that Final Fantasy IX is definitely like a brighter game. But it's a pretty literal spot-on translation, as opposed to something like, I'm trying to imagine this in the hands of like a Working Designs, right? Who were still localizing stuff.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
That may not have been
how much better it would be.
Just a real.
We need to play a Working Designs game.
We should.
You're not wrong.
I'm watching a friend of the show play
Star Ocean.
The PS1 remake of Lunar 1.
Lunar.
And boy, some of the choices made in the writing of that game make it way more memorable and also way more dated.
Bill Clinton. Everyone's favorite.
Milk it does a body good jokes. My favorite ad campaign from the late 90s.
So I guess, it's a satisfying story. There's a lot of text that the localization team had to manage.
Yeah.
The gameplay's biggest indictment is that it's fiddly, but it does kind of naturally lead to this sense of exploration, which it rewards you with. And I think this just returns us to the topic of gentlemen's. Do you feel like you could recommend this game? And the answer is maybe.
I like this game a lot. I would have
still
to think pretty hard about
I would still maybe recommend like Final Fantasy Tactics or Valkyria Chronicles as like a tactics game experience before this one.
I think this game made me acquire an ISO for Tactics Ogre Let Us Clean Together, you know, that I ripped legitimately from the copy I actually do own.
Sure. And then you then hand localized it.
Yeah.
Or learn
and
Japanese.
I think that's also a pretty good place if you want that. This is a game whose greatest strength for me is its novelty, because there's nothing really out there that is like this.
How about you, Jeff? As someone who's negative, is there... Okay, I have a very Jeff-specific question.
Okay.
Jeff, could you imagine recommending Tactics over, say, Shining Force 3?
No. You know what I think is a more interesting comparison? This is like a real lazy comparison too, in some sense. Would be this over like Final Fantasy 12, right? Because you can feel the Matsuno DNA in like the. There are things about 12 that remind me a lot of apparently Tactics Ogre, right? Like it's a game that asks you, more or less demands that you engage with and rely upon automation. Some pre-planning and some programming of events, and trust in like the system, trust in the process. Put very negatively, these are games that play themselves. It's not, I don't necessarily believe that, but like they there's automation, right? You are not swinging the sword and you are not manually selecting attack, right? And I think both of those are kind of interesting failed evolutionary branches. And they both deal with like similar political themes. They're both very ambitious, very late games on their respective platforms. They both got the Matsuno DNA, the Quest DNA, I guess let's call it. I feel like someone who enjoyed role-playing games and enjoyed Final Fantasy stuff and enjoyed Final Fantasy stuff enough that they thought 12 was okay could be scooted into trying an Ogre Battle, one of the two, this one or the SNES game, and maybe having an okay time.
I'm to understand the SNES game is easier to manage, but still has plenty of the same like hidden mechanics.
Let us not make this the sole barometer for quality of games, but it's worth noting that the top 47,858 games of all time podcast has actually ranked both of these games. On a list of about 920 games, Ogre Battle March of the Black Queen for the SNES is about dead center, and Ogre Battle 64 is in like the bottom third. Like the top of the bottom third, but the bottom third nonetheless. So, like, it's not, again, this is not a substitute for like broad, everyone consensus opinion, but I have reason to think that Ogre Battle for the SNES is held in somewhat higher regard than Ogre Battle 64. Perhaps because it's a simpler game, perhaps because it's a smaller game, perhaps because it's on the SNES and everything on the SNES gets a little special bump because everyone sure loves it. Nevertheless, I think for the right kind of person, this could work. But I think the right kind of person is like a vanishingly small number, right? Like, I think your general N64 crowd, this is like
Well, as an N64 child in the late 90s, I think I would have found this game impenetrable and terrifying because there's where do I collect the things? How do I butt stomp?
Like, I don't know. It reminds me of the first time I played Phantasy Star 2 on the Sega Genesis. I was about 7-ish years old, and like straight up did not understand like what this game was. Like the notion that like you explore and you fight and you talk to people in towns and they give you like all of this was like so far beyond what my brain could fit in it. It's like virtually the same experience, but for like a new generation of people who were like Diddy Kong Racing, motherfucker, let's go.
Diddy Kong Racing, motherfucker, let's go.
Yeah, and then like check this out. It's a big game. It has an ugly box art. By the way, the North American box art for this compared to the Japanese one is like a real bummer.
Yeah, like the Japanese one has like this beautiful hand-drawn artwork, and the US is just like this
big red logo.
Stupid logo.
It's like all but a tribal tattoo, basically. So I don't know. What do you think, CP?
It's kind of like I said. I would recommend Final Fantasy Tactics and Valkyria Chronicles before I would recommend this game, even if I got into some weird, grindy, bad, addictive tendencies on my part. Fuck, man, I would even recommend some of those PS2 front mission games before I would recommend this game. Just because at least those games are straightforward. They give you all of the fun little cinematics and anime storytelling with a less obtuse structure. I don't know. I think you're right.
It's just like, yeah, how much of this game for me is just there aren't other games like this. That's cool.
That is
because
cool.
I'm the sicko who's very into fucking Temple of Elemental Evil and Dragon's Dogma, because those are games that don't really have anything else like them.
This is something that I've been kind of struggling as we continue to do these podcasts more than one. It's like, yo, games are coming out that are new. Some of those games are good. Some of those games are really good.
Yeah,
and it's
Elden Ring.
Yeah, high quality piece of art, Elden Ring.
Gino Grieco's favorite video game, Elden Ring.
We're going to band together and agree to vote for Elden Ring for Game of the Year.
I hope this airs before their Elden Ring podcast does, because if you join the Discord for only $1 on the Patreon, you too can watch Gino slowly turn into the Joker.
But yeah, is this even a good representation of this subgenre of tactical?
No, it's a
RPGs?
Platypus. It's an
a platypus, right? Like I joked, you might want to check out Shining Force 3 before this game.
It is the ancestor of the whale that was a land dwelling
I wanted to throw up when I said that, Jeff.
I mean,
when I gave
look, like there, if you wanted to try a tactical RPG, like sight unseen,
it's still Final Fantasy Tactics.
It's still probably Tactics.
It's still Tactics.
Yeah. There's a case for like a recent Fire Emblem or something like a Valkyria Chronicles, but like realistically, Final Fantasy Tactics is a baby's first one of these.
It's a welcoming experience. It has a unified and also, let's say, truncated UI system.
You can break
still
the
got
shit out of
mechanical
it.
depth.
Yeah. There's things.
You can.
It will occasionally kick you in the fucking shins with like the V-Graph solo fight where you need to plan a little bit.
But you'll probably see the end of the game, and you'll probably enjoy the story. It's still probably one of the best stories that, is attached to the Final Fantasy name or even JRPGs in general. Whereas, this game is good. I wasn't wowed by some of the character stuff. It was there. I would say at best, like C+, C? I wouldn't give it anything lower than a C-. This is a game where your mileage may vary, and your mileage varies if you are willing to invest countless hours fiddling around with stuff so as that you can get a different, like, shiny little trinket that you can put in your key loop and then brag that you have this little shiny trinket on your key loop.
But you can also just kind of play it at face value and have a pretty good time.
Yeah. Like I said, you guys started playing a very different game for me at a certain point.
I did. I don't know if Brayden did.
I'm thinking about just like, come
to the dark side.
How much?
Come to the dark side.
How much should uniqueness factor into how much I like a game? And the truth is, I am a sucker for anything that is vaguely different and interesting, and that's why
I'll say this: like, I think that this game would have been a lot more enjoyable if, like, the actual exploration part of it, like exploring different corners of the world map,
slowly making your armies walk around these maps.
Oh my god, if the actual exploratory part of this game didn't progress at a crawl where, like, moving one inch on a road
Emerin Palladino, the game juice. It needs some more of it.
Yes. And that's, like I alluded to, there's literally a toggle for how fast you want things to progress in the world. And I think it starts cranked all the way up.
It starts in medium.
Okay.
But I turned it up to fast, and I mean, it is faster, but it's still, maps still take anywhere from like 30 minutes to an hour.
Yes.
And some of those later maps, maybe even a little longer than that.
It's a slow game.
It is a deliberate game, and, you know, it helped that I was usually watching stuff on another monitor while watching the stuff play out.
A podcast game, if you will.
Yeah, it is a podcast game.
Yeah, from before podcasts. So it was a radio play game. Yeah, like, I don't know. A teenager playing this over like a long summer break in the year 2000, and you've got nothing else to do. And inexplicably, you like RPGs, and
I mean, you could be playing Wizards and Warriors, parentheses, 2000, Jeff.
And like, inexplicably, you like RPGs, but you don't own a Sony PlayStation for some reason.
Yes.
They hooked you up at long last.
Yeah, I mean, that's the weird thing is, like, this is the only one of these on the Nintendo 64. We forget, but after Final Fantasy Tactics came out, it led to this, like, treasure trove of JRPG tactics games. And even if we have talked a mountain of yang about Disgaea, but those NIS tactics games, they have their defenders and they have their fans. Anyways, I think, gentlemen, we have gone circular in our arguments in favor and against this game. I think it's time to rank it.
I think it's time. So, I noticed a thing looking at this list where I definitely put Quest for Glory on here last time, and then I apparently didn't hit save. But I think I know where it went. So, to run down this list, and you may correct me, let's go from bottom to top. Secret of the Stars, at the very base of the pyramid. Draken, Revengers of Vengeance, Lord of the Rings Third Age, the Game Boy Advanced version, Arabian Nights, the Line of Mediocrity is somewhere in here, above which we have Lord of the Rings Third Age console editions, Ace 3, console, like all versions, Somabringer, Bahamut Lagoon, Dragon Quest 1, Fire Emblem, Shadow Dragon, and the Blade of Light. I finally wrote it down. Ultima 4, Quest of the Avatar. Above that, we put, I believe, Quest for Glory 1, So You Want to Be a Hero. Pretty sure. We can go back.
Sounds right.
We can go back and check the tape. That feels right. And then the top three, working up the podium: Grandia 2, Xenosaga Episode 1, Der Wilsermacht, and Suikoden 1. Genso Suikoden. Gentlemen, where do you think Ogre Battle 64 belongs? I guess to start in the center mass, let's work from Bahamut Lagoon. We up or down?
It's funny because Bahamut Lagoon and this game have a lot of weird similarities.
They really do. Like,
having seen a friend of the show play through all of Bahamut Lagoon, I'm going to say this is better than Bahamut Lagoon.
I think this is better than Bahamut Lagoon.
I would say so. How about Dragon Quest 1? The Erdrick game, what Erdrick goes around a G-shaped map and kills a dragon. A Draco Lord.
I could go either way.
It's weird because they are arguably in the same genre, but they feel like so far removed from each other at the same time.
I could go either way. Braden, you say your thing.
I will always recognize and reward weird shit, and thus I think this is better than Dragon Quest in that sense.
Yeah, it's gonna surprise you to hear this, I suppose, but I think it probably goes above Dragon Quest 1. Like, there's more to chew on. Like,
it's more ambitious.
Even as someone who wasn't, like, I don't know. I liked this game, just to lay my cards on the table, I like this game more than Quest for Glory 1. But that's just me not liking Quest for Glory 1 very much.
Quest for Glory is
it's a fine, great game, especially for those of you that like to go backwards in the timeline of These old school CRPGs, which are underrepresented on a list, but that's for a debate for another time.
Okay. So above DQ1 by Democracy, how about Fire Emblem 1 Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light?
Oh boy. Yikes. I think this was better than Fire Emblem 1. Just because it did more.
Yeah. Once we start getting into the Super Nintendo Fire Emblems.
Yeah, once we get into SNES Fire Emblems, there's no way that this game...
And the GBA Fire Emblems. Heck, even the GameCube Fire Emblems.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
How about Ultima 4 Quest of the Avatar? The fourth Ultima.
I'm going to say...
I had a better time playing this game than Ultima 4. I think that Ultima 4 is more important and, like, oddly ahead of the curve. And unlike Ogre Battle 64, it's not an evolutionary dead end. But this is a game that I could still envision a newcomer to video games I could give to in certain circumstances. I'm not ever going to recommend Ultima 4 ever. And I realize there are probably people who are listening to this who are going to write an angry email about why I'm wrong.
Please write an angry email. Inquiries@deep.lol.
Inquiries@deep.lol.
I don't know. I mean, even for all of the criticisms you guys shared about like the structure of this game and how it's like weirdly obtuse and bespoke, Ultima 4 is even more weirdly obtuse and bespoke than Ogre Battle 64.
Ultima 4 also came out in 1986.
They're of a kindred spirit in that sense of visible sliders.
Jeff, could you clarify what is above Ultima 4?
The next thing above Ultima 4 is Quest for Glory 1.
I would say this goes above Ultima 4, but not above Quest for Glory 1.
How do you feel about that statement, Braden?
Yeah.
All right. Well, democracy reigns. That's where it goes.
Where would you put it, Jeff?
I'd have put it one pip above Quest for Glory 1, but not above Grandia 2.
Oh yeah, if Grandia 2 is after Quest for Glory 1, absolutely not.
Yeah, it's on the list. I am hitting save.
Quest for Glory was a fun time that I finished
Google Docs,
in about
Jeff?
6 hours.
I am using a .text file.
Why not use Google Docs?
I ain't trust a Google Docs. It fails constantly, as opposed to my foolproof hit save on this text document system. Clearly,
.txt.
Yeah. So that's okay. So that's where it goes. The new number 5 on this list. This ever-growing list. Congratulations, Ogre Battle 64. You're okay. You're too much of a freak for me. But I will never tell you to put out your freak flag. You let that thing fly. Okay. You don't hide that under a bushel basket. Okay? Let it shine. Let your lordly caliber shine. It's worth checking out. It's worth checking out, and we didn't even talk about it, but it's worth checking out on the Wii U while you can still get it, which is 2 months? 2.5 months?
2.5 months.
Before they turn off credit card payments, and then about 5 months before they turn off your ability to add money. Yeah, not the whole store, just your ability to put money into it.
Which is basically shutting the entire thing down.
Yeah, their ability to process payments will be completely hobbled by August, and then the store itself will cease to exist in March or May of next year. So your chance to own a legit digital copy of Ogre Battle 64 on a unique platform is disappearing. So check that out if you want. There are a couple RPGs on the 3DS that I was looking at that I may wind up scooping up. Not 3DS games necessarily, but the 3DS Virtual Console has a small, interesting offering of stuff, including some like Game Gear games. Speaking of future plans, we need to lay out some future plans.
All right. Yep.
So we pre-gamed this a little bit, folks. This is the year of fan games, by which we mean games nominated by fans. We have our fan list. That said, other things come up. We get interested in looking at other games and other sets of games. And so we've got that list, and we will be poking at it. That said, some things have happened. So we got recruited by Gino, that Pinguino, Grieco, to do a follow-up episode on a certain Chopin no Yume Boken, or whatever the hell, Aka Eternal Sonata. So we are going to do that. That's not going to be the next thing we do, though. The next thing we're going to do is going to be either the return of Kusoge Carnival, a 3-game festival of pee-pee poo-poo. which went over very well last year and led to us discovering Draken and Revengers of Vengeance, and something else that was bad but not notably. Oh, it was Ys 3. That's what it was. Yeah. That's it was a game too good for its category. So a beloved fun time by us. But there's also the matter of seeing as we've dragged out N64 or N64 equivalent equipment, continuing down that road, because as we've mentioned, the vanishingly short list of English language localized games that qualify as role-playing titles. We could bump off most of the rest of that list if we did a three-way. So there's interest in both.
All right. So I think we decided, Jeff, you're going to flip a coin, and we are going to trust that you are not lying to us.
I am going to go to random.org and flip a Susan B. Anthony dollar from 1999. So we're going to call this one in the air.
Okay, so heads is
Kusoge, tails is N64.
All right. I'm going to hit this button. It went tails.
Okay, N64 grab bag.
All right. Please look forward to more high-quality output of the Nintendo 64.
What games are representative in the N64
Quest
grab bag?
64, Aiden Chronicles, The First Mage,
Yep.
and Hybrid Heaven.
Jeff has a weird fascination
Also
with
kind
Hybrid
of Body
Heaven.
Harvest.
Kind of Body
Are
Harvest.
we doing Body Harvest? I feel like we should not do Body Harvest.
Should we do Body Harvest?
The Tale of Body Harvest. I feel like I've said this already 5 times, but for those who have just tuned into this, the first episode, that was an not even an ARPG. It was just an action sort of open worldy thing that was developed by DMA Designs, Aka, the people who are Rockstar, and the writ they had was make an action game. And then when it became very clear to Nintendo that Square and Enix and everyone was not going to be a part of the N64 project, they went to DMA Design and said, hey, could you make this an RPG also, by the way, actually? And they went, oh, shit, okay, God, oh, man. And that game then entered a period of proper development hell where they tried to cobble in some JRPG-esque mechanics to an open world N64 exploratory shooter thing, at which point I think no less than Shigeru Miyamoto himself went to Scotland, looked at the thing and said, nah. And they were like, oh, so we can just do what we intended to originally instead of adding on years to this shit development cycle? So the game has weird vestigial elements of an RPG, including buildings you can enter and NPCs you can talk to, but then is ultimately just a game about driving around cars and shooting bugs. There's GTA DNA and Earthbound
it is a weird
DNA.
proto-GTA.
Maybe some people don't know this. DMA Design republished or renamed themselves to Rockstar North.
Yes, they are literally the Housers, etc. So it's a proper platypus. I own a copy, but it's not quite there. Maybe I'll play it a little bit actually and talk about it for like 10 minutes. But in the meantime, I'm just going to tell you guys right now, I pick Hybrid Heaven. That one's mine. It's mine.
I don't know which one to pick.
Can we do
Uni Racers? Can I pick Uni Racers if you're going to do DNA Designs? Is that an RPG?
Uni Racers is not a Nintendo 64 game or an RPG.
Braden, what are you going to pick?
I guess we can look at all 3 of these each. But
we're going to look at all 3 of them.
We're going to look at all 3 of them.
The Hybrid Heaven is the only one I own.
I'm going to maybe play. What's the minimum we need to play these games? 3 hours?
A couple hours.
Yeah. Spent 3 to 5 hours on them.
Not a ton. I don't know. Maybe I'll play some Paper Mario 1 and be like, wow, what a wonderful video game. What a great Mario RPG.
Yeah, what a fine follow-on to a bad game.
Yeah. This cute paper art style holds up so much better than these shitty pre-rendered sprites.
Yes, feed your hate. Yeah, I've heard Aiden Chronicles. I've not.
One I heard is okay.
Yeah, I've not ever known a lot about it. I've seen a lot of comparisons to period Elder Scroll games for Elder Chronicles.
I watched the YouTube reposting of all of the cutscenes of Hybrid Heaven put together like a movie.
It's a wrestling RPG.
I just have the cutscenes.
It's an RPG where you wrestle.
The cutscenes are somehow the worst part of that game because it has some of the worst audio compression you have ever heard. Aiden Chronicles, the Elder Scrolls of the N64. And then Quest 64, the Holy Magic Century of the N64.
Quest 64, the oh god, Zelda is coming out this year, so let's throw this game out the door 6 months too early.
It should be fun. Well, either way, we're going to have 3 more titles on this list. Then, I don't know, a fan game, a Braden pick, maybe the Kosoge Carnival. Who knows?
And Eternal Sonata.
Right, we need to do the Eternal Sonata thing. God damn it, Gino.
Yeah, we gotta do the No Yume series.
We gotta review Jeff's bullshit music shit.
Look, man, Final Fantasy V, Dear Friends, is a really interesting record. There's Sami in that. Like, people are singing fucking the language of the reindeer herders.
There's Sami throat singing in that album.
Yeah. The more I think about all the forests in Final Fantasy V, I'm realizing that whole game is pretty finished.
Da 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 da. Is it like that?
Exactly like that.
Okay.
It's a Final Fantasy V album that doesn't have Battle on Big Bridge. Like,
what?
Yeah. So it's like that alone is like, what are they doing? Like, we have to look at this.
All right.
So we're gonna. Hey, thanks for tuning in, folks. This episode of Off the Deep End was sponsored by no one. And if you would be interested in sponsoring episodes or just yelling at us, inquiries@deep.lol. That is inquiries@deep.lol. In the meantime, if you're not a sponsor but you'd like to find another fun way to support the show and our research and our N64 piracy, you can do so at patreon.com/deeplistens. That's patreon.com/deeplistens. Any dollar amount, literally anything, is appreciated. Any persons that you convince to join gets us one step closer to looking at Unlimited Saga, and we will probably be setting other subscriber interval goals in the future. We've already talked about one privately, and it will be a bad time. So that'll be a good time. It also gives you access to the Discord we run, where you can send complaints and prayer concerns in real time. I've got them on my phone. Anything that goes into the Off the Deep End channel, my phone chimes, and I will engage with you. So, engaged. Special shout out to the artist known as SuperSex420 for finding us for the podcast theme Halfway. This and other great tracks by SuperSex420 are available on Bandcamp.com, an epic website, apparently. See you next time. And remember, there's no such thing as cheating in a single-player game. Bye. This episode of Off the Deep End was recorded and edited on the traditional and ancestral territory of the Nisqually or Nisqually people, who have lived on and stewarded these lands and waters since times immemorial.